Welcome again to another episode of Nutanix Weekly, and not just any episode, but a very special episode. We're going triple digits for the very first time. That's right, episode 100. We've hit a milestone, and thanks for spending a little time with us and listening along. Going to be a little different kind of episode as we celebrate. We've got some familiar faces. We've got new faces. We might even have a special guest on the line with us. So it's going to be fun today. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of our favorite memories. We're going to talk about, maybe how we got here and how we got started on this beloved podcast. And we're going to see what stories we can share as we kind of pull back the curtains and talk about Nutanix Weekly, how this whole thing started. So I couldn't do it alone. So we've got lots of guests on the podcast. So first up, I want to introduce members of the XenTegra team. So Andy Greene, relatively new to the XenTegra team. Andy, what is this week number? Wait, you're like a baby because we're still in the weeks phase. We're not even in the months phase, right? So week number what?
Uh, Probably 16, 14, somewhere in there.
Okay, so not quite walking yet, but we're getting towards toddler phase. So yeah, Andy, if you've listened to earlier episodes, Andy came along, joined us from Cohesity, but like many of us, very affiliated with the Nutanix ecosystem. How many years did you spend at Nutanix, Andy?
I was there for 6.5 years, from 2016 up to 2022.
So during a major growth effort, you were with the company. So we love having you on Team XenTegra and appreciate you joining us for this special episode. Another somewhat familiar voice you may know is Mr. Chris Calhoun. Came to us from the Nutanix Enterprise team covering the Carolinas. Chris has been with us a little over 6 months now, and just turning out to be a rock star on the XenTegra team. Chris, how are you doing today, and how's life treating you?
Fantastic. Yep. Definitely glad to be here with this crew. Celebrating, obviously, 100 episodes is fantastic. I remember being on the Nutanix side and listening to this podcast, getting some of my buddies from Nutanix, some of the newbies that were early sellers of Nutanix say, hey, how can I get acclimated? Well, jump into the podcast, listen every week and see how the discussion goes. That'll give you an idea of really the ins and outs, and some of the bullet points that are covered each episode are great conversation starters. And I think that that's where I started listening in and really appreciate, obviously, at the time, Jirah and I worked alongside each other. And so then knowing as an extension to the XenTegra family, so that's definitely been a blessing to stay associated with both sides. So definitely glad to be here today.
Well, we're going to get to some of that, some of the interesting meetings, meetups, and plane gates as we go through the podcast today. But we've got some stories to share from behind the scenes. We also could not do this without some firepower from the team Nutanix. And so want to introduce Jirah Cox, one of our longstanding supporters, been on the podcast for a large percentage of the 100 episodes, maybe 99% of those 100 episodes. Jirah, how are you today?
I mean, no one that knows me will be shocked to know that I don't have perfect attendance. But yeah, it's been a blast. Been fun to grow it, right? From I think it was really me and Andy was like in a staircase somewhere on his laptop with a pair of headphones plugged in. So, look at us now, right? With a big centennial.
Yeah, no. Someone was talking about podcast fade, right? The idea that people launch a podcast, they get started with it, and then it kind of fades away. It's a lot of work. It takes effort to be reliable and to get episodes out there. So, this is a huge accomplishment. And I went back and as I was preparing for this, I listened to some of those early episodes again, and Jirah, you were there from the start. So it is great to have you here with us today to celebrate this.
It's a blast to be here. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I mean, thanks to XenTegra as well for, I'm I don't know, semi-permanent guest. I do none of the work to get this off the ground, right? So thank you guys for the diligence around the scheduling, the recording, the publishing, the driving of it. It's hats off to XenTegra all the way.
I appreciate that. We're also joined by Ben Rogers, another really familiar voice. So if we're rating number of episodes, I did not go and count, Ben. You can forgive me for that, but I'd say high 70, 80% of episodes probably been a part of. Ben's also been a long time supporter for us here at XenTegra and a good friend of the company. You were a customer first. Now you're at Nutanix as an enterprise sales engineer. It's great to have you here to celebrate with us today, too.
I appreciate that. I'm a little shocked that I'm involved in 70% of the podcast. I would have thought that I would have been a little bit lower. What's been interesting is how I got here. I was on the Citrix podcast, and then when I came over to Nutanix, Andy was like, we'll just put you on the Nutanix podcast. I knew a lot more about Citrix than I did Nutanix. So this has been great for me to learn about Nutanix and different facets of Nutanix. It's been great to hang out with the talent that's on this podcast because there's much smarter people on here than I am. And overall, I just really enjoyed it. I can always tell when an episode gets released because my LinkedIn will go crazy. And I'll go, I wonder what just happened. And it'll let me know that a podcast has been released. So it's been good for Nutanix. It's been good for XenTegra, and it's been good for me personally and my brand. So I appreciate XenTegra and Nutanix and everybody for allowing me to participate.
Well, we appreciate you too, Ben. Ben's always great. As one of the things you may or may not know listening to the podcast is that XenTegra holds in-person events all throughout the U.S., probably several a week. And Ben shows up for us. He's always a good supporter, helping us out, and really just believes in us and what we're trying to do here. And I mentioned we've got a special guest on the podcast today too. We've got a friend of the company's. He's someone I've gotten to know over the last couple of years, and mystery guest X. Are you going to introduce yourself?
Hey, thanks for the opportunity. So, Tom Powell, senior manager here at Nutanix, almost 10 years in, which is kind of crazy. And I know you see Ben's camera lit up. That's because we're using his microphone. So,
We're together.
We're together it this way. You never know, improvise. But yeah, look, a lot of talent on this podcast, and I'm not part of that. But we're glad to be able to support you, and you support us the way you do. And we've got some great partnerships out there with quite a lot of customers. So it's been exciting. And Andy and I go way, way, way back. So I might know something about the genesis of your company name.
Well, we're going to get to that because intersections is one of the things we want to talk about because there's a lot of intersections between this group of folks. And before we get to intersections, let's talk about beginnings. Let's talk about the very beginning. Jirah, when you think back to those earliest episodes and stuff, you mentioned it may have been Andy sitting in a stairwell with a laptop, but what stands out to you about what we were trying to do from the beginning?
The number one word in my mind is uniqueness, right? I've worked with a bunch of partners, and I've never worked with one before that had this really awesome idea of saying there's already so much collateral out there. We can, we're all being good stewards of our time. We can pretty easily take printed content or written content in long form and then make it a really interesting discussion topic, record it, and guess what? That's what a podcast is. So from as a participant in that, I like easy too, right? So, finding a blog post, finding a couple hopefully smart sounding things to say about it, putting it out there. It's a really novel marketing and really technical marketing play.
Well, Ben, we were talking a little bit about this before we started the recording today, but for everyone listening, how much preparation goes into one of these podcasts?
So my Tom, my manager, he always asks me on Monday, he was like, what's the topic? And he'll ask like at lunchtime, and I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, what do you mean you don't know? And I'm like, we don't get handed the topic until we get in the Zoom room. So all the listeners, when we come into this, we know nothing about what we're going to talk about that day. They pick the subject, and then you're either a subject matter expert, or guess what? What I'm doing half the time is I'm Googling, chat GPTing the answers so that I can try to get a little bit ahead of the curve. But a lot of the times it's on the line, on fire. So that's been one interesting thing about this is sometimes I've gotten in some conversations, I've gotten off the podcast and said, oh, I didn't do a very good job representing that subject. But that's quite interesting and unique about this is zero preparation, recorded online, live, no time to really prepare. You take the mistakes as they come, and if you do make a mistake, you try to circle back around and correct the mistake. But yeah, it's been quite an interesting being a participant of that with that just alone.
Yeah. And speaking of trial by fire, Chris, how long was it before I got you on the first podcast when you joined XenTegra?
It was the first week for sure.
Oh, so you had signed.
Right. Yes. Yep. It was, I think it started like maybe on a Tuesday or something like that, middle of the week. And then got an invite for that Friday. And I was like, wonder what I should be prepared for. And the answer is zero, right, Ben?
Yeah.
Or prepared for everything.
The answer is yes. Yeah. Be prepared.
Yeah,
Yep.
the
There you
unknown.
go.
Yes. So yeah, it was definitely, and I've thought that too. And Andy is a preparer. I can tell you that and Andy asks in the nicest way too. He tries to say, "Hey, Philip, what's the point of discussion today?" And I've given up. So I just said, "Nope, it's a surprise. Quit asking. Just show up for the fun."
There's definitely a wing and a prayer aspect to this.
I love wings.
But wings and bread. We'll come back around to that one too.
Okay.
It's one of those things. Like, I appreciate this because the point of us having this discussion is to learn. It is something where there's grace. If we do happen to get it wrong, we'll circle back around. But what we didn't want to fall into with this was paralysis, right? You can prepare so much that you end up never actually getting it done. And so we wanted to get this out. We wanted to be able to talk. And we've got good people always on the podcast. And so it's never a concern of not getting good information. We've got a great basis, tons of information we've covered over 100 episodes that's been produced by Nutanix Technical Marketing. We have a basis. We're not completely just winging this. We've been supported by so many writers and technical experts that put out this information. So it's a great way to just kind of base the podcast because, again, we have that safety net of the blog post we're reviewing. We have, again, great technical chops represented on the call. So when I think about this podcast, there's a lot of really interesting intersections between the team. So how many people on the call have reported to Tom at some point in their career? Tom's covering his face. So yeah, we got a couple of former employees that were on Tom's team in the enterprise. And then Andy, you spent time at Nutanix as well. So I'm the odd man out. I've never been on staff at Nutanix. So I'm the only one. So, just keep that in mind. Might have to do a tour of duty at some point, but it's fun to have all of you guys kind of there. Tom, you mentioned knowing a thing or two about how this company, XenTegra, got its name. So everyone has an Andy Whiteside story. Andy Whiteside's our founder and CEO. Tom, what's your Andy story?
So Andy was he was my SE when I was a customer. You guys not hear us?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Gotcha.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. So Andy was my SE when I was a customer of Citrix, and I ended up interviewing. He was on my interview panel when Citrix hired me as a SE. I spent 5 years there, and then Andy decided to start his own partner business, and I considered an opportunity to go work with him. And he said, "We need a company name," and it was really founded on integrity. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of Xen from the Xen desktop, Xen app, kind of that whole Citrix ecosystem. So I put the words together and said, this word's not used, so it looks like you could create XenTegra. And the rest of that's history. I decided to go to work at Nutanix, clearly, and he built a fantastic company with XenTegra and surrounded himself with a lot of smart people, which is a good move on his part. So do I have regrets? You go back and everybody makes choices for a reason. But yeah, so that's an interesting intersection we had.
Yeah. So my intersection is actually really similar to that. So Andy was my Citrix SE years ago when I was working at a previous company. And my story I'll tell is this was right around the time of Xen Client. So you could put the operating system on any old piece of trash computer and turn it into basically a thin client, sort of like iGel does today. And so we came in, we were working on some stuff, and we literally went to the graveyard in the back of our building and found the oldest, crappiest computer we could find. I mean, it didn't have 5 1/4 drives on it, but it was kind of that era, right? And we put Xen Client on it, and at the end of the engagement, Andy goes, "Hey, can I take that with me?" And I want to say, I think he carried it in his trunk and showed it off for a long time after that. So it was one of those fun sort of interactions. And then when XenTegra was founded, that company, still a customer today that I get to work with my old colleagues. And so we were one of the first to sign on because we loved that if we work with XenTegra, they're going to invest back in us with conference passes and things like that. So we signed on with that benefit early on. So really cool to hear your story too, Tom. Andy Greene, I'm going to come to you now. So we saved you a little bit. We didn't throw you in first week, but your first episode was actually a in-house episode. We did one together, and I'm curious, kind of. You are the preparer in the group, but how are your nerves coming into one of these episodes?
My nerves are good. My voice maybe not so much. I had some vacation last week. I managed to bring back a little bit of a cold with me, so hopefully that's not too disruptive to the listeners out there. But I've also got my own Andy Whiteside story, if it's okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Please share.
Sure. So, I mentioned earlier, I started with Nutanix back in 2016, and it was just a really fantastic time, for the company and also for myself, just, surrounded by really good people. And I remember we were in a different office back in those days. It was on Hunt Street in Durham, and Andy spent a lot of time in that office. He was just a recurring face that we saw a lot back in those days. And, he always struck me as a really smart guy. Even back in those days, he described that kind of consultative approach to doing business. And I think, what all of us saw was that he had a demonstrated expertise around VDI specifically, but more importantly, he got Nutanix. He understood what we were doing and why it mattered. And I think that was for me that really impressed me, because we always needed those partners that understood us and were willing to go into a dogfight with us, so to speak.
Yeah, and that's really how we got started here at XenTegra. Is we need good infrastructure to run VDI. We were such a VDI centric company, and that's where our genesis happened. I mean, Nutanix is still a great platform for running VDI. And so we've been all in kind of from that perspective, but it's fun to get to go that next mile, right? Chris, Andy, as we're working our opportunities and stuff today with customers, I would say it's a maybe 25% of those are VDI based, and almost everything we're doing is more across the generalized data center anymore. So that's a huge shift for us as we've kind of moved things forward together. Do you agree?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think the Nutanix guys are nodding because I think it's still the numbers roughly what 25% of all Nutanix customers still use or one of the purposed workloads is VDI. Isn't that right, guys?
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, still definitely super solid for foundational VDI workloads, but now getting into deeper into the tech, more moving away from specialist to generalized, and now even back to some specialist around the AI workloads. So I think it's seen a great shift in. Of course, I even heard a customer say, "Hey, oh, that's the VDI storage company." And that's interesting because that was a very old mindset of how to look at Nutanix. And I think that in itself is an evolution of growth for both our company as well as Nutanix. Like obviously super focused on the VDI workloads, expanding, growing. And I think that that's why we are here today. And that's why, Philip, like you said, we did reach 100 because there is value in our message to our customers and the Nutanix platform technology as a whole. And I think I'm preaching, I know, but it's what we're passionate about. That's why we're here today,
What I have to add to that, I feel like at 100 episodes, we're just at the tip of the spear.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think we've covered nearly all the breadth of what's going to be out there, what's going to be capable here. And that to me is exciting too, because, talked about podcast fade or pod fade or whatever the term was. I don't see that in our future. We've got lots of road to travel ahead.
Absolutely.
Intersections was one of our topics. Chris and I, we've got a fun intersection story. We were heading out to a little thing called Nutanix Global Tech Summit a couple of years ago, and we ran into some logistical problems. Jirah was there.
That wasn't the problem, to be fair.
To be fair, that is true.
I think I know the story you're talking about.
Yeah. So, Chris, you want to tell that story? Maybe one of the first times we met in person?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And what's interesting is we've corresponded through email prior, but yet we were sitting there both looking around thinking, okay, how do we get from point A, East Coast, to point B, West Coast? And there were two different groups flying. There was an early crew and then the mid-morning crew. And the early crew, their flight got delayed, postponed, delayed, canceled, delayed. And yet the mid-morning crew, everything seemed to be okay. And then the whole route there, it was constantly checking back in because that's the Charlotte market was the regional hub for everybody, from the Raleigh folks that had driven down to come from Charlotte to we had half a Nutanix either flying over across the U.S. to Vegas and the other half waiting in Charlotte to catch the second flight. So it definitely was.
If there had been cameras, it would have kind of looked like The Amazing Race, if you've ever seen it on TV. We were running from gate to lounge to gate to lounge, and it's one of the few times I have spent, because it was supposed to be like a 6:50 a.m. flight to Las Vegas. And when we got to the airport, they were already saying it was going to be afternoon before we left. And so we camped out, had breakfast, then lunch, and then we're all crowded around one particular gate. We've all started to get to know each other pretty doggone well because of the hours we had spent together. And I got the one solitary upgrade seat or the one standby seat. So I had to say goodbye to everybody. It's like, see you when I see you, maybe not see you this week. We didn't know because I don't think we ever got an answer why we were delayed.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
one of the few times we spent all day in an airport.
I remember when you got to Vegas and it was like the end of the day.
Oh yeah.
We were
Yeah.
all fixing to like go to, to bed, and here you are rolling up and we're like, you're just now getting here? And you had the disheveled look on your face like, yes, I'm just now getting here.
Yeah, well, and I was happy to be there because there were others still waiting.
Yeah.
It sounds like to me he needs to let Andy do the planning.
That is
Greene.
the truth. Andy Greene for travel agent.
Yep.
Funny. I remember that.
So as we talk about some of these things, we've had lots and lots of discussions over the years that this podcast's been going on. I'm curious, as a listener, as someone who shared it, what's the one sort of topic that sticks out to you as maybe the funnest episode or the funnest thing that you've listened or heard as we did 100 episodes? Jirah, I'm going to go to you first.
There was an episode with an analogy about data locality that compared data locality to where would you want to sit at a country restaurant buffet. And I mean, you can't listen to it on audio, but Philip about fell out of his chair there laughing. And that was magical. I wish I'd thought of that myself.
I'm assuming that the answer was I want to sit on the buffet.
Closer. Yeah, closer to the exactly closer to the buffet, right?
Yeah, we've had a few of those sort of analogies over the years. And Harvey Greene, who was on a number of our podcast episodes, Harvey's the probably the skinniest dude that eats the most I've ever seen in my life. Shout out to Harvey, because it is one of those things where I do not know where he got his metabolism, but I want to buy one.
I'm jealous. Yeah, a little jealous.
Yeah, a little jealous. And so it's always a food analogy when it comes into to where to sit. So yeah, that's a great one. Chris, Andy, Ben, Tom, any of you guys have episodes or things that you remember that were standout from past episodes?
I'll jump in on, I don't remember the technical detail because, of course, the conversation just skewed one way, the other way, and Harvey was included. So it was Andy Whiteside trying to get you guys back on track. But then Harvey was all over the place. Jirah was laughing. Philip was laughing. It was definitely a Harvey as the center of that conversation that had nothing to do with technology, but it was obviously valuable. But that's what is meaningful today is us getting together and sharing the stories. That's why we're here. So yeah, it was definitely a Harvey episode in the past.
It's funny. The things that happen to come up. I mean, we've had all sorts of squirrels run across the screen and us just get lost and go down a rabbit hole over the years. But I wish we had like a clip train so that we could just pull out some of those. Maybe
little harp music intros.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
I mean, there was the episode after you got Partner of the Year, Philip, and then the subsequent episode where we took probably 5 minutes of build-up, like probably way too much in podcast terms, setting that up around. So this thing happened, and you were just dying the entire time, both for yourself and probably for the audience having to listen to it.
Yeah, I was turning all sorts of shades of red, and it's funny to do something like this and be comfortable with it. And then to also suffer from that kind of embarrassment too at the same time is kind of a funny juxtaposition for sure. We've talked about family, we've talked about vacations, all sorts of things in between, because that's part of this too. Is we want to know each other and from the beginning, XenTegra was created to create community, and this is just another way of creating community. So, Jirah, I'm going to ask you about something that happened the year before the airline incident at GTS, but we were in a big room. I think it was after a keynote at GTS, and I'm standing there with you and a few other folks, and some people came up to us. Do you remember that day? Some people came up. Maybe the term is fanboying over the podcast, and I think it caught us all a little off guard.
From overseas, right?
Yeah.
I've slept a little bit since then. Sorry. Yeah, we had some folks that knew the podcast from listening overseas, right? And they wanted to come up and meet, I think, the three of us, right, as the people that were on the podcast.
It was cool.
That was pretty wild.
I don't think we got asked for a autograph, but we did get asked for a selfie. So.
Not that you're bitter about that. years later, still carrying the memory of where we not asked for an autograph.
Ben, you mentioned that too, the how beneficial it's been for you from a personal brand situation, that kind of thing. What stands out for you, or what's your story like that from the podcast?
So a couple of things for me. I always had a fear when Jirah wasn't on that I was going to say something that got was technically not correct. I was thrilled that we had a podcast that was about containers and container automation, that we didn't have Jirah on the podcast, and we had a very good podcast. And I was like, wow, and so it was a little bit of a victory for me, that I was like, all right, I'm able to survive the podcast without having my all-knowing technician there, Jirah. So that was a good one. And then, man, we've had some really good conversations about where the technology has come from. Like, you look at what we're doing with containers and NDB and replication, and just really driving that back to the goodness of AOS and understanding where the zeros and ones are, and how really all of our products kind of hinge off of that idea of data management and data governance. And that's going to be a really key thing. And now, containers and AIs, we've explored a lot of great technical things that I sometimes come from this podcast and do additional research in the subjects that we're talking about. I also have people that's reached out to me to ask more information about for the company. And so I'm just real thankful that I've been involved and been able to cross all those bridges. But some of the memories I've had is the fear of, Jirah's not going to be on this call. We're going to have to work that one out. And the victory of, this was a really good call, and we covered a lot of good content that's going to be valuable to our listeners.
So just so you know, Jirah, when you called Ben earlier, it did show up as crutch. I don't know if that means anything.
Well, in that same vein, it's so funny when Chris and Andy joined the company. We've got a sales rep on the XenTegra side named Mark Henderson, and Mark is one of our top salespeople. Mark called me up shortly after Chris joined the company, and he goes, "Man, I got a man crush on Chris Calhoun." And I think maybe after his first interaction with Andy Greene, he called me up and he goes, "I got one on Andy Greene too."
Oh Lord!
I appreciate that sort of feedback, right? I mean, it is true. Like, we all have people we look up to. Jirah is one of those people for me as well, Ben. And it's just really cool to get to work with extremely talented people. And that to me is part of this too, is participating, doing this. We've had lots of guest speakers, people who focus in certain verticals. We had Kurt Tellep on with us for an episode about healthcare, and it's always a great time to talk to Kurt. And when he joins you, and I know it's a podcast, so you're listening and you don't get to see it, but when he joins you from his lab, from his home, like there's so much legitimacy. Like he's got soldering tools and things like that in the background. Like he is the true deal. Like you know you are with someone great when you've got his soldering iron in the background. Not to mention all of the great stuff. Like it looks like it could be a professionally photographed, virtual background, but it's not. It's his actual lab. So.
Wow.
There's lots of fun things that have kind of happened over the years. Intersections, beginnings, where are we going next? I want to take some predictions as we kind of wrap up today. So I'm going to give you all a little bit of time. What is your bold prediction of what comes next with all of this? And I'll go first. Give you a chance to kind of think of your own predictions. But for me, I think there's a tectonic shift happening, right? We have a lot of disruption in the industry, but not all of that has necessarily played out as we expected. There's still a lot of things happening, but the belief in platform has to be incredibly validating for everyone at Nutanix, because the thing that stood out to me when I really dug into Nutanix is that this is way more than hyperconverged. This is a platform. It's made to me simple. And to me, now everything that's happening at Broadcom is validating that platform is the right play. And so to me, I think more of this sort of back and forth will happen. It's sort of like Android and iOS, Apple and Android. There's this back and forth that happens that makes you both sharper. But man, what a validation there has to be around being a platform. You see the 900-pound gorilla doing the exact same thing that you guys have been doing for a while. So I think platform for me is kind of the future, and that's kind of where I would start. So who wants to go next? Jirah?
No pressure. I think to get to look back at just computer history, right? More and more functionality delivered in software that used to be defined by hardware, right? So right now, of course, that's been our company history of saying things like, storage arrays and chassis and whatnot now become software-defined constructs, but applied to some of the latest cutting edge, right? That now becomes things like today, AI is a very hardware-heavy construct, right? But AI, as it gets more democratized, as it gets more consumer bite-sized, and gets spread around everywhere, right? As all of us are calling this on laptops that can do AI more capably, right, than they could 5 years ago. That's going to get very interesting, to where AI stops being a go buy a small truck worth of GPUs and put them in one place, to where now I have AI everywhere. That's going to get wildly exciting, and then just more of the continuation of things that were hardware defined becoming software defined, and therefore they can go anywhere. Are two easy to bet on trends.
I'll
really like.
pile in on that. He segued into kind of what my trend's going to be. I think you're going to start seeing more concentration on performance, and AOS being tuned to get performance in cloud environments. So a lot of companies are going to cloud, but the performance is not what they want. And to get the performance that they need is costly. And so I see AOS being a clear winner there of providing performance in some of these cloud environments for what exactly Jirah is talking about. Software driven, getting the performance out of the software that's then able to manage the hardware. I see that kind of a prediction is we're just going to get faster and faster and faster and faster. And we're going to be able to bring that goodness not only to on-prem where we control the hardware, but also in the cloud where we're leasing the hardware as an IaaS infrastructure. So that's kind of my prediction. You're going to see some better performance in cloud based on the tunings that we do within AOS.
So
Yeah, and
go ahead, Andy.
Oh, well, I was going to say, Jirah touched on the concept of the software-defined data center. And for me, the first time that I saw Prism with AHV, I felt like that dream had been realized, right? We had seen some really good products change the way that we managed the data center, managed virtualization, and all of the hardware that was driving it. But to me, Prism was when it got really, really good. So, my thoughts: containerization will continue to grow. Companies are looking for lighter weight ways to run those applications. AI will change things in ways that we really can't foresee. But I think that Nutanix got it right at its foundation. Right, a house is only as good as its foundation, and we've seen that as Nutanix was just has been a great fit for the data center, for the edge, for the cloud. We understand that workloads are moving; they'll continue to move around from data center to cloud and potentially back. But I think that in its core, Nutanix really got the foundation right to give our customers that type of portability.
Yeah, Andy, I was going to say, I'll be here 10 years at Nutanix next month, which is, if you consider the age of the company, I'm one of the OG, and while we initially came to market with an appliance, to see us fully, evolve to a subscription-based software company. And what is that? What do I predict? We're going to continue to see innovation. So if you think, born in an appliance HCI, that was the only market we could go after. You see how that's expanded. We recently announced early access for NC2 on Google Cloud, right? So now we're in 3 major cloud providers. People are probably familiar with our announcement with Dell around PowerFlex. Looking to the future, seeing those things extend that may bring other players to the market that address customer needs and concerns. So to me, that's the thing I feel best about, is that we've got our ear to the ground, listening to what customers are saying. Hey, here's my challenges. How can you help me? So whether that's AI at the edge with containers, VMs in a data center, or doing true hybrid multi-cloud, that operating system allows you that consistent experience. We're going to just continue to innovate in that space, make it faster, to Ben's point, and then make it agile. So if you need to move, your platform, to your point, Phil, is already ready. So we're building it to be ready for whatever next is. And speaking of next, I do want to put a plug in for our user conference that's in May, on May 7th through 9th. I know a lot of those XenTegra folks are there, and you got a lot of your customers coming. We appreciate that. But it's going to be a great event, some exciting announcements. And then most of the faces on this podcast here are going to be there live in person, so we get to shake your hand.
That's it. Chris, you are going to bring up the rear here. Since you're our bald friend, I think there's a joke somewhere around. Don't look at me that way. Some crystal ball sort of analogy here, my friend. But we were picking at him before the podcast about using Windex to do his hair. So
signed up and ready for episode number 100.
101, baby, 101.
Well, today and 101. So basically, here's my thoughts, and I think the timing of the Broadcom notification, whatever their situation, is really telling, in the sense that what happens, or what would have happened if that announcement was made 5 years ago, when I would say AHV probably was not as sharp and defined, and it has the 10 years birthday celebrated just recently, within the past 6 months. So to me, that timing is really solid for a couple reasons, because it has led folks that were diehard VMware fans that built their careers on that to now realize that, hey, Nutanix has a true and tried solution, because of course a lot of folks wanted to do bake-offs. It was about hypervisor. Well, it's not. It's about the platform. And that's why if you can get past the individual checkmark for checkmark of feature set, then you've obviously decided, hey, I can move to the cloud, because you don't care about the hypervisor in the cloud. You care about the platform. Well, that right there is the first hurdle that often, I'll say, gearheads, techies, virtualization gurus from the past have started to realize. And to me, what that does now is opens up the possibility of, okay, now do we move to a more agile platform in a hybrid cloud? And if we do, we've got 3 options now. If we keep it on-prem, okay, great. Let's develop that crystal bald head model looking into the future of what we want to make it, which is exactly what everybody has said. Ben, you said speed. Tom, you said agility, automation. All of these are the concepts that you want out of a solution and a platform. And had it been 5 years ago that Broadcom said that, then it's maybe not going to be the right timing for Nutanix, because there wouldn't necessarily be those believers that, hey, they do have a solid platform, because that path to the platform is AHV, to get to that agility, because that's where all the development is coming in. The speed, the efficiency, the software-defined data center is through the platform. So again, I'm happy to preach, and I enjoyed today's session, obviously, with the crew here. Fantastic. I got all kinds of good stories of first meeting Ben whenever I was at Nutanix, and my rep and I attended a XenTegra workshop. Mm-hmm. So that was back in the Harvey and days of between him and Andy lugging the cluster from his trunk and setting it up for customers. That's exactly what it was. And I think, Ben, that was your first week at Citrix.
Yep.
So this community that we're building is really something powerful. And I think that our outreach should not be limited to just a podcast. Let's keep preaching. Let's keep educating customers. And I think that they'll see the value of what we're doing, the passion that we have, and the solid platform that is Nutanix.
All right. So I love that you brought up the cluster, because that is an OG XenTegra go-to-market, right? We took a cluster around everywhere. Well, we tried to revive this after COVID. And so here's your trivia question. Whoever wins this, I'm buying you a beer at .next. But how much do you think it is to ship that cluster from North Carolina to Michigan for one of our workshops? Closest to the pin wins. So, Jirah, what do you expect?
I will take $298.
Okay. Chris?
$412.
Andy?
$456.
Ben?
$515.
And
we're going Price is Right rules, right?
Yes, of course.
Without going over.
$365.
$365. Well, Ben, you win, my friend. It was $795.
Oh, my goodness.
Now, I will tell you, I have a little unfair advantage of that. I'm going through this with a customer right now. They're shipping nodes across the place. I had a little bit of knowledge of what that costs.
That's called
wow.
This guy. And these were heavy. This was one of those 4-node 2U chassis.
3060s.
To it. Yeah.
So we've learned today, replicating in software is way cheaper, kids.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely is.
You can run that in the cloud and there's no shipping costs.
Exactly.
But, you don't get the huge spin up of the fans and the whine and like run everybody away from it.
Oh, there's plenty of wine right here.
Oh, yeah.
That was gonna be my Andy Whiteside story of, like, I had just started Nutanix. This was like 7.5 years ago. And Andy, to his credit, would invite anybody he knew at the company to be like, hey, come do a webinar with me. Mm-hmm. Webinar meant you came and met him in this tiny little, almost a one-man office with the cluster on the table behind you, and you foundationed it and set it up live on camera for customers. And at that point in time, Andy didn't know this. He probably could tell pretty easily. He knew way more about foundation than I did. So I'm like, what am I doing here listening to this like server screaming away in the background of a webcam? This is a lot of fun.
So, Jirah, a funny story about that. When I started at Nutanix, it was the same thing, right? And I got a 3460 out of the demo pool, and I was told by my manager at the time, he goes, "You can't just keep that thing in your car and take it around and show people." And I'm like, "Why not?" So it became a running joke with the VP of sales at the time. Is like, oh, call Powell. I'm sure he's still got it in the trunk of that Ford. And that's what it was. And Andy and I did a bunch of that in the early days. Was XenTegra dragging a bunch of gear out and showing the Citrix could run on anything. But seeing's believing, and a lot of people just couldn't believe that you could get all that infrastructure in a small package like that. So anyway, good story.
I think it also, like, when you would do it on site, you would get the cluster up and running in like 5, 10, 15 minutes. There's a lot of power to see, from nothing to bare metal up and running to AOS up and running. That's a lot of, that is seeing is believing, in my opinion. I always enjoyed that.
And it's funny, it changed the industry, right? I mean, this kind of radical making something that's very complex. I mean, foundation is actually probably a very complex activity under the covers, but the activity to the customer is really simple. And that's one of the things that I do love about everything that Nutanix is pushing out is there's a focus on that user experience that I think is really compatible with kind of the way we want to do business at XenTegra. We want things that focus on outcomes, that make things easier to consume, that help you meet your business objectives at the end of the day. And so that's I know Jirah's been on enough episodes with me. He's probably tired of hearing me, but I just love the simplification. That to me is what makes technology mainstream because, when we get into the guts, I remember early training modules and stuff on Nutanix University, when we were learning about Medusa and all of the subsystems underneath the covers of the storage system, like, hey, there's a lot of complexity there. And, learning the different components and how things are architected, the fact that you can do something that complex in a very simple way is a huge win for customers.
Yeah, I was fascinated when they did an AOS upgrade where they started splitting some of the files out and they did it for performance. And it dawned on me then, it was kind of a kick in the pants moment for me. Like, there's a lot of tuning that can be done in the software of this system that's not even to the table yet. And so there's still a lot of goodness to be developed, a lot of goodness to be tuned. And I just really have a feeling that we're on the forefront of something great for the company. I mean, we're going to be in every cloud by the end of the year. We're going to be able to be premises pretty much wherever you need to be. Nutanix can get you there, and Nutanix can get you there with a performance platform.
And it's a great point, right? I mean, we've seen such performance increases through refactoring and software. It's no longer specialized hardware under the covers, no longer having to engineer that years in advance. We're able to realize, and you're able to deliver to all of our customers that kind of performance increase, which is really incredible. Right?
All those first-class citizens. So one thing I steal from Tom is VMs and containers are first-class citizens on our cluster. There's no performance decrease from one and run to the other. And I don't think a lot of our competitors can really say that. They can do one really good, but I don't think they can do both as well as we can.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, for everybody listening along, we have exhausted an entire hour. It's been fun reminiscing, sharing stories, talking about how we came to know each other. Hope you've enjoyed listening to us. On behalf of everybody here, Jirah, Chris, Andy, Tom, Ben, myself, Phil Sellers, thanks for listening in. We'll catch you on episode 101 and hope you have a great day. Take care, everyone.